أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. حي على الفلاح.
Thank you, Basma. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I begin this talk in the name of Allah, in the name of God, the compassionate, the most merciful, and may we all be embraced by His unending mercy. Assalamu alaikum. I greet you with the traditional Islamic greeting of peace. May peace be upon you. So, to satisfy my own curiosity, I wonder if I could ask you, for how many of you is this the first Ramadan event for you? Okay, well, welcome to Ramadan. Ramadan, actually, we welcome Ramadan. Ramadan visits us every year, and then it extends its welcome back to us. What I want to talk to you about tonight, I was asked to speak a little bit about the idea of tolerance. But as you can see from the title of my talk, I want to go beyond tolerance. I think tolerance is is a wonderful thing, but I think that we should regard it as our minimal requirement for living together in this world. At very least, we should be able to tolerate each other. But what I want to talk to you about tonight a little bit is the meaning of tolerance in Islam, and also some of the other ideals, some of the other principles and sentiments that we find within the Islamic tradition that speak about tolerance and then what is more than tolerance. So, as you see, I said that we should transcend tolerance, go beyond tolerance, let alone hatred. Tonight, this is Ramadan, we have no room for hatred. There's no place for it here. Of course it exists in our world, and I don't want to be blind to that fact, and we will discuss that briefly. But actually, hopefully, we will have some insight into the meaning of Ramadan for Muslims and how this can be extended beyond just the Muslim community to the global community. So, globalization is what brings us all here. Hong Kong is often known as China's global city, China's international city. And if you look around the room, you can see this is truly a global gathering. I'm from the United States originally. I've been in Hong Kong just for a little over a year and a half. And thank you for welcoming me to your city. So when I talk to my students, I talk about globalization sometimes in terms of religious studies. And I try to, one of the things that I talk about is that globalization is not a new thing. Globalization is as ancient as humanity. I mean, we began as a community. Scientists say that we began probably in some part of Eastern Africa, Southeastern Africa, as one community. And from there we spread and proliferated until we came to dominate this whole planet. So you will find human beings, Homo sapiens, on every continent of the world. And I would say you would find Muslims in virtually every place as well. So you see the human tendency to spread and proliferate. And what globalization is, it's a process that has been going on for millennia, actually. And it's what I tell my students, it's the human family reunion, right? We began as one family. We dispersed throughout the world in this massive diaspora, and we were isolated from each other. That's how we developed different languages, different colors, different cultures. And now, slowly, we are coming back together. And actually now, not slowly, right? In the 21st century, this process is accelerated beyond what our ancestors could have imagined. And we call this progress. But the question is, have we really progressed? Has this really contributed to what we might call an improvement or a betterment for humanity? I'm not going to answer that question tonight. It's sort of a rhetorical question. But I'll leave it to you to think about it. Now, the Quran, the scripture of Islam, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, between the years of 610 and 632. So it's a 23-year process, the revelation of the Quran. Now we see here in the 49th chapter, or surah of the Quran, God speaks directly to his human creatures. And he says, "O humanity, we have created you from a male and a female, and we have made you nations and tribes for you to know each other. Surely the most honorable among you in the sight of God is the most pious among you. God is all-knowing and all-aware." So right here we see, of course, Islam is a religion, so we're speaking from a religious perspective. There's mention of God, there's mention of creation, and there's mention of purpose. So the purpose of humanity being spread out around the world, becoming differentiated, the purpose is for us to then come back together and know one another. To know each other as nations, as tribes, as different people, but then, perhaps, to reflect upon our commonality and our basic similarity. So we live in a world of different religions. You could say that these are the tribes and the nations that God speaks of in that passage from the Quran. And now, once again, we are coming to know one another. That's what this event is about. That's what interfaith dialogue is about. That's what intercultural dialogue is about. And this is an interesting photo that I saw from a British publication. How we come together, how we encounter one another is a matter of perspective. Do we do this in peace? Do we do this in harmony? I mean, when animals come together, or even human populations, there are different possibilities of what can happen. That encounter can be a clash, or it can be a collaboration. So that's our choice. And, you know, as the picture suggests, I get a sense of a little bit of uneasiness or suspicion, and maybe that's natural. Maybe that's a natural instinct. It's just part of our survival instinct. But can we overcome that? Well, we have to. We live in a world of diminishing resources. We have limited space. There's almost 7 billion of us today. There will be almost 9 billion of us by the end of, or the middle of this century. And right now, 1.57 billion of those 6.8 billion are Muslim. So if you just roll the dice, you're likely to encounter a Muslim in your life. So if this is your first Ramadan Iftar, it may not be the last time, certainly won't be the last time you'll encounter a Muslim in your life. So we must come to terms. This is our, if you believe in that Quranic injunction, this is our God-given ordinance or purpose, that we must know each other. Now, I'm sorry for the version of PowerPoint is not so compatible with the system, but if you can read it, the Dar al-Islam and the Dar al-Harb, these are traditional ways in which Muslims have seen the world, and also traditional way in which non-Muslims have encountered Islam. So the Dar al-Islam is the abode of Islam, where Islam is predominant, where Islam rules. The Dar al-Harb is seen as the opposite to that, the abode of conflict or war. Now, this is certainly in history, this was a way in which Muslims and non-Muslims encountered each other. But it is not the only way, and it is not the only possible way. This is what I would like to impart to you this evening. Because in the classical formulations of Islam, in Islamic law, not only do we have this dichotomy of Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, war and peace, we also have what's called Dar al-Sulh, the abode of concord, the place of common ground where people can meet and trade and exchange and encounter. And this is a very dynamic process through which we can grow. We also even have, and this is particularly relevant to our experience in Hong Kong, we have in Islamic classical jurisprudence, we also have this idea of the Dar al-Amn, which is the abode of security, where Muslims can feel that they live in peace and security, even in a non-Muslim, predominantly non-Muslim environment. And these are just as valid interpretations of the Islamic tradition as the one which posits believer against non-believer. There's no reason that we have to be frozen in that position, because there are many, many options within the Islamic tradition. And even in the Quran, in a very early surah, in a very early revelation to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was commanded by God to give this response to non-Muslims. And it says, he is told, say, O unbelievers, non-Muslims, I do not worship what you worship, and you do not worship what I worship. Nor will I worship what you worship, nor will you worship what I worship. To you your religion, to me mine. Now this, in the early days, this was revealed to the Prophet at the time when the Muslims lived still in Mecca, okay, when they were actually a persecuted minority under non-Muslim rule. And the Prophet was instructed to say this. Say, look, we understand we have our differences. You have your religion, I have mine. Maybe we will not see eye to eye on everything, but live and let live. You have your way, we have our way. Now that is the basic, the prerequisite of Islam. The most minimal requirement is to you your way, to us our way. Tolerance. We tolerate you, you tolerate us. And we can live together. Perhaps it's not always easy, but it is necessary. Now, of course, people will also talk in the Quran, they will talk about the verses which later promote some kind of armed, military, violent conflict between Muslims and non-Muslims. But we have to understand each one of these revelations in its context. As I said, the Quran was revealed over a 23-year period, and during that history, there were many, many different dynamics on the ground. There were times where Muslims and non-Muslims fought. There were also times where peace was promoted. There were times where tolerance was the emphasis of the day. But there's more than that. There's more than that, and that's what I wanted to show you tonight. And we must remember that every religion is also a work in progress. It develops over time. Now, we may believe, as Muslims, we may believe that the Quran is the absolute standard by which we determine what is right and wrong, but that doesn't mean we stop using our minds to reason what is the best situation in any given circumstance. What is the best approach, I should say, the best method. So the Quran offers us many, many different methods for dealing with adversity, for dealing with difference. And I would say that tolerance is the most basic. And then after that, we see how the Islamic tradition has developed. Now, these are the words of a Sufi mystic named Al-Hallaj, who lived in the 9th and 10th century. And he wrote this. He said, "I have pondered as to how to give religious faith an experimental definition," which means, of course, we can't have a perfect definition, but let's see what works. And he said, "I formulate it as a single principle with many branches." So religion is one, but it has many branches. "Do not demand, therefore, that your companion in discussion adopt this or that confessional denomination." You cannot require your companion to have the same religion as you. That would prevent him from arriving at an honest union. It is up to the principle himself, and of course he means the divine principle, he means God. It is up to the principle himself to come to this person, this man, and to clarify in him all the supreme meanings, and then this man will understand. So it is not the job of a Muslim. In fact, it says in the Quran very clearly, "La ikraha fi din." There is no compulsion in religion. We cannot compel someone to believe. We must let them go through their own personal journey, their own personal process. And this continued, generation after generation. Muslims continued to interpret the principles of Islam. In the 12th century, Ibn Arabi, another great Sufi Islamic scholar, he wrote this. He's known for his very high-minded philosophy, but he also wrote poetry. And this is one of his most famous poems. Very similar to the previous one. "Once I used to reject those whose faith was not mine. My heart has since grown capable of taking on all forms. A pasture for gazelles, an abbey for monks, a temple for idols, the Kaaba for pilgrims, the tablets of the Torah and the leaves of the Quran. My religion is love. Whatever path its caravan takes, love is my religion and my faith." So this, to me, is the logical and also the sentimental conclusion. It's where we go from tolerance. When we exceed and excel tolerance, we come to love. First, we must know each other. And when we know each other, well, sometimes it will lead to some conflict, but when we really see eye to eye with our fellow beings, how can we not fall in love with them when we see ourselves in them? And as the Sufis would say, when we see God in each and every one of them. So this Ibn Arabi is saying some things that are very controversial, you might think. He's actually saying that his heart is now universal. His heart is open to everything. Once he wasn't that way. He wasn't even tolerant. So this leads us to our condition today. We live in a world of many cultures. They are blending, they are clashing. We don't even know what forms they will take. But if we follow the example of Ibn Arabi, maybe we can take all forms. Maybe we can adopt all forms. And that's why interfaith dialogue and cooperation is a good thing. I mean, at very least, in terms of tolerance, at very least, when we're eating together, we can't be killing each other. You don't want to reach across the table like that. It's not polite. So, interfaith dialogue, cooperation, and the recognition that we have a shared destiny. Again, the story is, we're all in the same boat. And if one person tries to destroy the boat, we all go down together. So it's better that we each capitalize on our own talents and contribute them to the greater cause. And that is the meaning, that is going beyond tolerance, seeing the other as the self, which is attested to, once again, in the very heart of the Islamic tradition. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "None of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself." So people who say they are Muslim, if they don't engender love in their hearts, unfortunately, according to the teachings of the Prophet himself, they are not truly believers. So we must all aspire to that higher calling and to that love, because that's what makes us genuine. And finally, I leave you with the words of perhaps the greatest, or at least the most famous of Sufi poets, Jalaluddin Rumi, who said, "Be certain, in the religion of love there are no believers or unbelievers. Love embraces all." So I will leave you with that thought. Thank you very much for your attention.
And now I would like to invite Mr. K.C. Lung, Buddhist Store Editorial Chief Executive, to give us a speech. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to speak here and meet you here. So every time I listen to what James' speech, I really enjoy. This is a great speaker. So I'm not. So I have to refer to my notes. Today I'm going to speak Buddhism and tolerance. The Buddha taught us to live and view the world according to reality. So that leads to, according to Buddha, that is the wisdom. So I wish I can do that always. Therefore, when I got this subject about which I should speak this evening, I know I should think and act in this way. So the subject I'm going to speak about this evening is tolerance and Buddhism. According to reality, I know I shall not be simply telling you that there is a high degree of tolerance in Buddhism. I should not tell you simply that. Yes, tolerance is an important concept in Buddhism. But does every Buddhist act, live, relate to others, speak or view the world, or my own, or other people's situation with a high degree of tolerance? I hope we are. However, the answer is uncertain. Sorry for not having prepared a lot academic findings or content from Buddhist classics. But let me once again confirm that it is a teaching of Buddha that we have to embrace tolerance. Let us look at the recent happenings in Burma. For many years, there has been tension between hardline nationalist Buddhist monks and other minority ethnic groups, including Muslim population. The State Sangha Committee in Burma is very concerned about some Buddhists who insult and denigrate other religion. Yu Sendi is the General Secretary of the State Sangha Committee. He said, we in Myanmar or Burma can protect Buddhism without insulting other religion. People of different religion can work together in a peaceful way. There's no need for religious extremism. We can learn from Indonesia in that way, in that respect. And then he continued, he said, Buddhism is fundamentally about loving kindness, though other religions also teach compassion. If we can accept each other's ideas, there can be peace both in Myanmar and throughout the world. Look at the PowerPoint here I'm presenting here is the news piece that we've written on our Buddhist Door website. We have news every day on our website, and this is one of those some days ago. So this is the news is about top Buddhist authority in Myanmar or Burma begins moving against extremist Buddhist organizations. So they're not satisfied with the situation there, so they would like to ratify the situation. So the message of this news is that while there are peace-loving and tolerant Buddhists, there are also Buddhists who do not follow this principle. But of course, we are glad that there are Buddhist leaders and followers who make particular effort to maintain tolerance and peace principles and act accordingly. So before I joined Buddhist Door, actually I worked in a refugee relief organization, and I met a lot of Rohingya people in Thailand and Bangladesh. They're refugees. They're Muslims originally from Burma. I cannot forget them, and I cannot forget the suffering, although very probably I do not have the opportunities to meet them again in my life, because it's so difficult to go back there. Buddhism as a religion, like all other religions in the world, is not independent of the world that we live in. Therefore, when we talk about religious tolerance, we cannot isolate the concept from real life. And the reality is that while tolerance is certainly the ideal, the principle, and the vision, real life poses a lot of challenges to its practice, the practice of tolerance. And because of this, we have a lot to do and have to make a lot of effort. Well, only a month ago, in Taiwan, where we always go, in Taiwan, they have executed a man convicted of killing 4 people in a subway, an attack that strengthened support for the death penalty on the island or in Taiwan, where violent crime is rare. Jiang Jie, who was only 23 years old, was executed. There was strong criticism pointing at the Ministry of Justice, who is a Buddhist, and who had obviously speeded up the execution before she stepped down in the preparation to transfer the cabinet to the newly elected Taiwan president. The Ministry of Justice said the death sentence or death penalty was necessary because of the severity of the crime and public demands to uphold social justice. If I am asked about the stance of Buddhism as regard to capital punishment or death penalty, my simple answer is that Buddhism does not support it. The concept of tolerance also comes in here. Buddhism exists in many forms. Under many organizations, there is no unified Buddhist policy on capital punishment. In terms of doctrine, the death penalty is clearly inconsistent with the Buddhist teaching. Buddhists place great emphasis on non-violence and compassion for all lives. The first person, actually, or principle, requires individuals to abstain from injuring or killing any living creature. The Buddha does not explicitly speak about capital punishment, but his teaching shows no sympathy for physical punishment, no matter how bad the crime is. So actually I have some notes about punishment here, but because I want to save time for you, so I'm not going to read that out. Well, despite this Buddhist teaching, several countries with substantial Buddhist population retain death penalty, and some of them, for example Thailand, continue to use capital punishment. Some Buddhists argue for keeping capital punishment in order to keep order in the society. Well, it is clear to us that if Buddhists hope to practice tolerance, they must address the issue from many perspectives for their lives and from many aspects in the society in which they live. I believe this is also true to other people. In fact, we can and we need to support the practice of tolerance in many ways in our lives. Or depending on the situation around us, there are many ways we can do. The tradition of giving, for example, is one very good example of what we can do, always do in our lives, daily life, in order to create a tradition of tolerance and practice tolerance. Well, in the PowerPoint, we can see it is called dana. Dana. It is kind of giving, the tradition of giving goods, including also giving, sharing with you our doctrine, and it result in not here and now, but in your life. Well, what we believe is that it result in the goods that we bring to you in the life thereafter. So there are a lot of concepts and on principle around dana or giving. So we can read a lot about it in our books. So I'm not going to. There's no time for me to present it. Why dana is so important to practicing tolerance? It is because if we love to give, we can really grow our heart to be tolerant. For example, in Taiwan, now we are getting more popular, more popular in Hong Kong. We promote, for example, body or organ donation. In fact, Buddhist organizations all over the world are joining hands and working more and more in this aspect. In deciding to donate or donating our body or organs, we learn more the concepts of egolessness, non-being, non-ego, non-self, which is important principles in Buddhism. We also learn non-discriminating. These are all based on tolerance. So look at this picture that we take from Xizai, the hospital in Taiwan, that the students in the university has to learn how to appreciate. They call the body a wordless teacher, because the teacher teach them medical knowledge without a word. They are the body that they donate, with the body that they donate. So by now, we may all actually appreciate that if you want to learn and practice tolerance, there are many ways. When we start by learning how to relate to others, for example, to accept others' criticism. So when people criticize me, I can accept them. So I learn how to tolerate. However, we may also start by learning something from our own, without yet, or later we should, but without yet relating to others. We can learn from our own. For example, giving and appreciating the principle of discrimination. So, like this one, in our tradition, this is a dandelion. This flower, we see this one when the wind comes, everything is gone. Almost the whole flower is not like that again. So we learn that actually things will not stay with ourselves forever. So this is the principle that we learn from observing the nature. So now, without ourselves, we would learn that we should share with others if we can, and we should not always like keeping the money to myself, keeping the food to myself, and so on. So finally, I wish to thank you for listening to me for these few minutes, and I hope that I really thank you for being so tolerant to me. And let's enjoy. Oh, we have finished our food talk already. Thank you.
Let's invite our last speaker, Reverend Will Newman from Hong Kong Network of Religions and Peace, St. John Cathedral. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our hosts very much for inviting and for organizing this event this evening. Tolerance is a difficult subject. We think tolerance is good, and James and KC have spoken on the value and importance of tolerance. James, I appreciated that you said that tolerance is the minimum. Tolerance is better than intolerance. If we are intolerant, then it's like we're saying, I am right, and if you are different, or you think differently, or you believe differently from me, then you're wrong. That's intolerance. So of course tolerance is better than intolerance. Tolerance recognizes the other and allows their right to exist and their right to be different from me. And that's a good thing to do. But as I say, I agree with James. This is completely basic. But tolerance has its limits. There are some things that we should not tolerate. We should not tolerate evil. We should not tolerate violence. We should not tolerate killing. These things are against the rules of Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, and all religions. There are some things we should not tolerate. We think that toleration is a virtue. It's a good thing, but not everything should be tolerated. We should not tolerate the violence that men so often commit against women. We should not tolerate pedophilia. There are many things that should not be tolerated. But if we all compiled lists of what should not be tolerated, maybe our lists would not be identical. Some things would be the same, some things would be different. Some things we would say, some of us would say are acceptable, other things they would say this should not be tolerated. And this brings me to another point. One of the earlier speakers mentioned that in interfaith dialogue we should focus on what we agree about. I don't think we should always do that. I think we should also explore our disagreements, because we should attempt to learn from each other and to see each other's point of view. One of the maybe I'll come back to that later. One of the things that we were asked to talk about is our own religion, in my case Christianity, and its contribution to nations. I'm not sure how I can address that. My own country, Britain, still, I think, has some reputation around the world as a country of tolerance and fairness. This reputation goes back several hundred years. If you look in the history, 200 or 300 years ago, refugees came to my country, to Britain, from other European countries where they were being persecuted and killed for their religious beliefs or their political beliefs. They came to Britain as a place of refuge, a place of safety, and that still happens today. People still go to Britain to escape from persecution, sometimes in their own country, because Britain has a reputation as a place where there is a rule of law, Britain has freedom of speech. You're not condemned or imprisoned without reason. You're free pretty much to say what you like and to write what you like. These are all forms of toleration which come from the Christian values that are at the heart of Britain and many Western countries. Of course, the West also has responsibility for a great deal of violence and conflict around the world. We seem to get involved in too many wars. Maybe our countries, although we're nominally Christian, we don't actually follow Christian teaching all the time. So there is a tradition of tolerance in the West, but of course, as Casey spoke, there are Buddhists who are peace-loving and Buddhists who are not peace-loving. The same is true of Christians, unfortunately. So we have this tradition of tolerance. But for Christians, of course, our reference for how we should try to understand the world and live our lives, our reference is Jesus. Christians believe that Jesus was the Son of God. So what can we find out about toleration from Jesus? Was Jesus tolerant? I think the answer is yes and no. Jesus was tolerant of sinful people. When people complained against Jesus because he would eat food with sinners and tax collectors. Tax collectors are the worst sinners. But Jesus didn't make any barriers against sinful people. People thought that if you eat with somebody sinful, then that makes you sinful. Jesus said no. Jesus was happy to eat with those people and talk with them and spend time with them. Jesus never condemned other people. He always wanted to draw them into a closer relationship with God instead. But Jesus was very intolerant. He was especially intolerant of religious hypocrisy. He was intolerant against people who pretend to be righteous, or people who think they are righteous, who are self-righteous, but who use religion as a way to control others. So Jesus was both tolerant and intolerant. Should Christians tolerate other people who are different from us? Yes, we should. Jesus was a Jew. His people were the Jews. But the population was very mixed at that time in Israel, Palestine, where Jesus lived. Many Gentiles, many non-Jews, many foreigners. And there's some evidence from the Gospels that Jesus at first understood that his mission was only to the Jewish people. But as Jesus encountered non-Jewish people, a woman of Samaria, a Roman centurion, a soldier from the occupying empire, the Roman Empire, Jesus met these people and he found that they also had faith in God, and he found that they were also good people and he didn't refuse to help them. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, it's a very well-known parable. It's the story of a man who was traveling on a road and he was attacked and beaten by robbers. 3 people came past him. The first one was a priest, that's me. And he sees this wounded man lying in the road and he does nothing, he walks past. The second one is the assistant in the temple. He does the same thing, he walks past. The 2 holy men who are supposed to be the upholders of the religious law, they do nothing for this man who's been beaten up. The third one who comes is a Samaritan. Samaritan is a foreigner, non-Jewish. The Samaritan is actually almost an enemy of the Jewish people. And he is the one who picks up the wounded man and takes him to a place where he can be healed. So Jesus himself, in that story, in that parable he told, he uses a foreigner, the other, to shame his own people. St. Paul, writing after the life and death and resurrection of Jesus, said that in Jesus Christ all people are one. Male and female, Jews and non-Jews, slaves and free men, all are one in Jesus Christ. All of these distinctions and divisions that we have between us are broken down in Jesus Christ. The barriers that we build to protect ourselves and to keep other people out are broken down by Jesus. Because we are all children of God. And as a Christian, I am called to see the image of God in all people. Not only in other Christians, in all people. All of us as Christians, we are called to look at the other person and see in each person the image of God. If I'm doing that, then how could I be intolerant of any of you? Impossible. But Jesus always calls us to a higher standard, a better way. Because as James also said, tolerance is not enough. We have to go beyond tolerance. As a Christian, I should not just tolerate others. I should welcome others. Jesus welcomed all people, men, women, children, Jews, non-Jews, sinners, rich, poor, all of them. Jesus welcomed. He never pushed anyone away. He never said, I don't have time for you. He welcomed them, he challenged them, and he tried to transform their lives and their way of seeing other people. I want to finish with one of the stories of Jesus from the Bible, from St. John's Gospel, chapter 8. It's the story of the woman taken in adultery. The story is that a crowd of people come to Jesus and they are dragging with them a woman. And they say to Jesus, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. And they say to Jesus, what should we do with her? The religious law is clear. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, the religious law says that if there is adultery, then the man and the woman should both be stoned to death. They haven't got the man, they've got the woman. So the religious law says she should be stoned to death. So what's Jesus going to say? Is he going to say, okay, go ahead, keep the law, stone her to death? Or is he going to say, because everyone knows that Jesus is loving and compassionate, is he going to say, you shouldn't follow the law? Then he can be condemned because he's a lawbreaker. What does Jesus do? He doesn't do anything. He bends down and he draws with his finger in the dust. And this crowd of angry men who have dragged the woman here, they wait for Jesus to say something. And Jesus stands up and he says to them, let the one who is without guilt cast the first stone. And one by one, they all go away, because they know that they are also sinners. All of us are sinners. And in the end, it's just Jesus and the woman. And he says to her, is anyone condemning you? And she says, no. And he says, then I don't condemn you either. Was Jesus wrong? Was he tolerating adultery? Jesus teaches us to look at each person as a human being. Jesus sees beyond the sin that the woman has committed. He sees a human being in need of love. Thank you.
Now we have an award presentation ceremony. May I now invite Mr. Adam, President of Pearl Institute, to present the award. The first award is the Peace and Dialogue Award, which goes to the Hong Kong Network on Religions and Peace. May I now invite Reverend William to receive the award on behalf. Thank you, Mr. Adam. Now the second award is the Peace and the Charity Award. May I now have the presenter, Mr. Masood, Chairman of Pearl Institute, to present the award. And the award goes to the Islamic Union of Hong Kong. May I now invite Mr. Safai receive the award on behalf. Thank you. Last but not least, may I now invite Mr. Solid, Executive Director of Pearl Institute, to give us a closing remark.
Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very proud of being here because I have learned a lot tonight from our guest speakers. I also want to say something about tolerance and finish tonight's organization. We know that the main purpose of religions is to bridge, to unify humanity on the path to virtue, not to divide it. However, we also know that each faith system has its own traditions, and interfaith dialogue should not aim to reduce this diversity. Interfaith dialogue is a must today, and the first step in establishing it is ignoring polemical arguments and giving precedence to common points. We have to look for our common points. Tolerance is the most critical condition of dialogue. Tolerance does not mean being influenced by other people or joining them, but tolerance means accepting others as they are and knowing how to get along with them. Ignorance and prejudice are the source of current conflict, and it only can be solved through a tolerance and dialogue, because tolerance opens the doors to dialogue, and dialogue makes people to know each other. So today, people who came here, we should call them, you are people of dialogue, and I believe that the new world you will build based on tolerance. And also Professor Frankel's speech reminds me a new word, because he talked about place of Islam, abode of war, abode of peace. But there is a new word now, which is taught us by the famous Islamic scholar Fethullah Gülen. He thought that we can see the world as place of service. We can service for people, for other people. We can find happiness in other people's happiness. This must be our philosophy, I think. Okay, then I sincerely appreciate to Islamic Union of Hong Kong for sponsoring venue and partnering, and also Hong Kong Network on Religion and Peace for their support, and restaurants, Turkish restaurants, for their delicious food donations, and of course grateful to Turkish women, Central Asian women, and Russian women for their delicious homemade food. And of course the biggest gratefulness must go to you. If you didn't come tonight, we cannot share our food. Thank you for coming. Wish you a peaceful life.
On behalf of the Islamic Union of Hong Kong and Pearl Institute, thank you so much for visiting Masjid Ammar. Indeed, this is a very great evening to have all of you with us here tonight. Once again, thank you very much for your presence. God bless you, and good night to each and everyone. Ramadan Mubarak. Thank you.